Hello and welcome back to the Navigating Your Mental Health Compass video series. My name is Sarah and I'm a registered clinical counselor living and working in Vancouver, BC on the traditional unceded and ancestral territory of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Navigating Your Mental Health Compass is an 8-part video series that provides evidence-based education and strategies from acceptance and commitment therapy, also known as ACT, to help you build greater self-awareness, learn effective strategies to better your mental health, and move beyond obstacles to live a life with meaning and purpose. This is episode 6 in this series. As always, I encourage you to go back and watch previous episodes if you haven't already done so. Although the episodes don't necessarily need to be watched sequentially, I usually reference content from previous episodes, so it can be helpful to watch them in order. In the first 5 episodes of this series, we covered the ACT core processes of present moment awareness, also known as mindfulness, acceptance, cognitive diffusion, and the observing self. In this episode, I'm going to review the ACT concept of values. Values in ACT refer to the qualities of behavior and experience that we want to embody and pursue throughout our lives. Values are overarching principles that guide actions and decisions and are not specific to goals or outcomes. Ultimately, living a values-based life is associated with greater meaning, fulfillment, and psychological well-being. What I've always loved about the way ACT approaches the concept of values is the idea that even though we all experience struggles, with some of us experiencing greater clinically significant mental health issues than others, the ACT concept of values proposes that despite these difficulties, we can live a life with meaning and purpose. Furthermore, ACT does not propose that we must get rid of our struggles or not have mental health issues in order to have full and meaningful lives. This is an approach that I find to be less pathologizing and more strengths-based. I've seen clients feel hopeful when they hear that they can still have purpose and meaningful lives even when they have experiences of anxiety, depression, trauma histories, and other mental health struggles that don't necessarily go away quickly. As you may be well familiar with by now, we are using the compass metaphor in this video series to illustrate the 6 core psychological processes in ACT. In this compass metaphor, north is represented by the core process of values, what truly matters to us in life. True north is about identifying what gives life meaning and purpose and is akin to travelers following the North Star to help them move in the direction they want to go. All right. So let's dive in deeper into the concept of values. In ACT, the concept of values serves as the behavioral component of the therapy. So far in this video series, we have mostly focused on the cognitive and emotional components of ACT, namely mindfulness, acceptance, cognitive diffusion, and the observing self. This episode on values and the next episode on committed action focus on the behavioral component of ACT. These behavioral components really work to build on the internal psychological components we've already gone through. Values represents what is most important and meaningful to each of us. In ACT, values are considered intrinsic. They are personally chosen, and unlike goals, which can be achieved or failed, values are ongoing and can be pursued regardless of external circumstances. ACT emphasizes the importance of flexibility in pursuing values. When circumstances change, we are encouraged to adapt in a way that continues our efforts towards value-guided actions. The more we live in accordance with our values, the greater sense of integrity and authenticity we experience. And consistency in choosing actions that reflect our personal values will foster a sense of purpose and satisfaction in life. I think it's pretty safe to say that all of us want to live a life in accordance with our values. The biggest stumbling block I've seen for clients when it comes to values involves clarifying and knowing what their personal values are. Most times when I ask clients about their values, it's the first time they've considered this topic, and they're often unsure and need time to reflect. In this fast-paced patriarchal world we live in, most of us are familiar with goals. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with goals. We all need goals, and goals can be very helpful in moving our lives in the direction we want to go in. And I'm not saying that we need to get rid of goals, but I'd like to invite you to consider adding in a values orientation. ACT encourages us to focus on the process of living in accordance with our values, rather than always fixating on the specific outcomes or results that tend to be goal-oriented. Shifting from focusing on our goals to focusing on our values helps us engage more fully in the present moment and helps us derive meaning and fulfillment from our ongoing actions and experiences. A values-focused life is about embracing the journey and not just focusing on the destination. And trust me, I know that sounds cheesy, but just bear with me. In ACT, the concept of values plays a crucial role in promoting better mental health by enhancing meaning and purpose, which can act as a buffer against feelings of apathy or emptiness. Building resilience, living in alignment with our values helps us become better equipped to navigate setbacks and adversities because we are grounded in what truly matters. Fostering self-compassion. Living in accordance with our values involves self-kindness rather than harshly criticizing ourselves for perceived failures or shortcomings. Reducing avoidance. Values-based living encourages us to confront challenging emotions and experiences rather than avoiding or suppressing them. This means that we do what's important to us even if it brings up uncomfortable emotions in the short term, because in the long term, it brings us a sense of meaning and purpose. Okay, so hopefully you're at least feeling a little bit intrigued by the concept of values, and you may be wondering, so how do I know what my values are? This is a very common question, and I want to normalize that many of us haven't taken the time or been given the opportunity to reflect or consider our values. So if you notice a sense of anxiety arising because you may not know what your values are, just notice this discomfort and invite in some self-compassion, as well as the perspective that a lot of us haven't done this in a structured way before. So, before we discuss some ways to help you identify your own personal values, I want to briefly go over how ACT defines values. Values are, first up, action-oriented. In ACT, verbs are often used to identify values because values are action-oriented. They involve doing something rather than being a certain way. For example, happiness isn't considered a value in ACT because although happiness may be an outcome we experience, happiness is not an action in and of itself. Examples of values that may bring about happiness are things like connection, cultivating meaningful relationships, or self-development, engaging in personal growth, and gratitude, practicing an attitude of appreciation. Next, values are personally chosen. A lot of us likely have adopted certain values and beliefs from our culture, our family of origin, and from experiences in life, which is not necessarily a bad thing. However, from an ACT perspective, values are personally chosen by each individual and are not necessarily the same as the values we've grown up with. For some, it can feel scary to differentiate their values from loved ones, and for others, it can feel freeing. So just notice what's coming up for you. Values, as I mentioned, are ongoing. There isn't a checklist of completion for values. You're never done with your values. Values are ongoing. I often use the metaphor that values are like doing the laundry or doing dishes. You're never finished laundry or the dishes. These are activities you engage in, for better or worse, throughout life. Values are the same. They're ongoing. Although the certain actions or behaviors in alignment with our values may change over time, the idea is that we continually move in the direction of our values. Okay, so now we are going to move into an activity that you can engage in to help you identify your values. I invite you to think of this activity as a starting point. You may not necessarily have all your values identified and solidified by the end of this episode, and that's totally fine. You can continue to reflect on your values and engage with identifying them in your own time. This is a process that takes time. I find it helpful to think about the different areas of our lives and reflect on what matters most in each area when identifying our values. Here are 4 categories you can consider, but please feel free to personalize these to your life. Relationships, work and education, personal growth and health, and leisure. Relationships includes all relationships in your life, including relationships with your friends, partner or partners, children, parents, or other relatives, coworkers, and other social contacts. Work and education includes the workplace and skill development. Personal growth and health may include religion, spirituality, creativity, life skills, nature, physical activity, nutrition, and/or addressing health risk factors. Leisure, how you play, relax, or find enjoyment. These include activities for rest, recreation, fun, and creativity. Okay, so now that we have defined these 4 areas, I want you to consider what is truly important and meaningful to you in each of these domains. I know this may seem overwhelming, so let's focus on identifying one value per each of those 4 domains. You may notice there are different values for each domain, or there may be some similarities. In order to help you identify your values, think about times in your life in these areas when you felt the most alive, fulfilled, or proud of yourself. Reflect on what made those experiences meaningful and how they align with your priorities. I'll give you an example from my personal life, and that can give you some time to identify your own values and give you a bit of a head start. I'm going to focus on the work and education domain. So, one of my values in this area is social justice. I'm passionate about increasing accessibility to mental health support services for everyone. I was able to identify this value when I reflected on my life and realized that I've always been drawn to helping people. Whether it was holding my grandma's hand when her mobility was compromised, or volunteering to provide peer support when I was in high school, to simply picking up garbage when I see it on the street. I was also able to identify my value for social justice in the work and education domain when I thought about the people in my life I look up to. I've been fortunate to have some wonderful mentors throughout my education and career, and all of these mentors have demonstrated strong anti-oppression-based values. So now that I've given you an example of how I was able to identify a value in my life in one of these domains, I want you to take some time and see if you can identify one value per domain. As a reminder, the domains are relationships, work and education, personal growth and health, and leisure. Now, I don't want to overwhelm you, but I know that it can be difficult to identify values as they can be somewhat of an abstract concept. So I'm going to include a list of some possible values, just a short list. Please know that this is not an exhaustive list, but rather a list of some values to get you started. Remember, there are no shoulds with values. You select the values that are personally meaningful to you. You may have similar values across the 4 domains, or you may have a different value for each domain. For now, just focus on selecting one value per domain. Here are some prompts to help you identify your values before I provide that short list of possible values. First up, reflect on what matters most. Consider what is truly important and meaningful to you. Next, notice peak experiences. Think about times in your life when you felt most alive, fulfilled, or proud of yourself. Consider role models. Think about people who you admire and look up to. What qualities or characteristics do they possess that you find inspiring? Identify feelings of discomfort. Sometimes feelings of discomfort or dissatisfaction can signal a misalignment with your values. So reflect on moments when you felt uneasy, conflicted, or out of sync with yourself. What underlying values might be at play in those situations? All right, so with those prompts in mind, here's a short list of some values to give you a start on identifying one value for relationships, work and education, personal growth and health, and leisure. Okay, so I'm sure that wasn't nearly enough time to identify a value for each of the 4 domains, but the purpose of this exercise was to simply get started on the process of values identification. Remember, those were just a few examples of values. It's important to note that values are highly individualized and may vary from person to person. We're going to pick up on this activity in the next episode on committed action. So for now, just note which values you have selected, and if you need more time to reflect and choose, then spend some time after this episode finishes and see if you can identify one value per domain. The sweet spot is to have 4 to 6 values in total. We don't want to have too many because then we lose sight of them and it's hard to keep track of them, and we don't want to have too few. So having around 4 to 6 in total is what we're aiming for. In ACT, values are not only guiding principles for living a meaningful life, but they also serve as powerful strategies for managing difficult thoughts, emotions, and situations. This can be through values-based action and problem solving. Instead of reacting impulsively or avoiding uncomfortable situations, we can choose to respond in ways that are consistent with our values, which can cultivate a sense of empowerment and resilience in the face of adversity. By reflecting on what is truly important and meaningful to us, we can reframe challenges as opportunities for growth, and this shift in perspective can provide a sense of purpose and motivation during difficult times. Values-based coping strategies. So we can develop specific coping strategies that are aligned with our values and priorities. For example, if one of our values is connection, we may cope with stress by reaching out to friends or loved ones for support. Similarly, if creativity is one of our values, we may cope with difficult emotions by engaging in artistic or expressive activities. And finally, we can use values as a compass. When facing challenges and situations or difficult emotions, we can use our values as a compass to guide our behaviors and decision-making. In this video series, values align with the north direction on the compass, guiding us in the direction we want to go in. By focusing on what truly matters to us and aligning our actions with our values, we can navigate through adversity with greater clarity and sense of purpose. Before we wrap up this episode, I just want to briefly review when engaging with our values may be unhelpful. Engaging with values in ACT is generally considered beneficial for promoting psychological well-being and leading to a meaningful life. However, there are certain situations or circumstances in which engaging in your values can be unhelpful or counterproductive. First up, if we become overly rigid or dogmatic in pursuit of values, this can lead to inflexibility and difficulty adapting. Remember, ACT is all about psychological flexibility, so whenever rigidity comes up, there's usually a negative outcome. This is actually one of the things that I really like about the ACT concept of values, is that instead of rigid adherence, ACT promotes flexibility. This may look like recognizing that a particular value is no longer serving you, so instead of complying with this value, you change course and connect to a new or different value. Engaging with values may be unhelpful if it's used as a form of avoidance to escape or suppress difficult emotions or experiences. Values shouldn't be used as a means of avoiding uncomfortable or distressing thoughts and feelings. Remember the metaphor of emotional tunnels versus caves from a previous episode. We often need to move through difficult thoughts and feelings instead of trying to avoid them. We also want to be careful about blindly adopting values that are imposed on us by external sources such as society, culture, or family. This can lead to internal conflict and inauthenticity. Remember, from an ACT perspective, values are freely chosen by each person. Okay, so that wraps up this episode in the Navigating Your Mental Health Compass series. I'm so glad you joined me for this discussion on values. Up next is episode 7, titled Taking Action. This next episode is really going to build on the content from this episode, so be sure to check it out. Once again, I'm Sarah. Thank you so much for joining me. All the videos from the Navigating Your Mental Health Compass series are on YouTube, so be sure to take a look and watch and rewatch your favorite episodes.